Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 5, Episode 12, The Stall. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I am really excited to talk about this episode. It's one of my favorites of the entire series. But before we get into that, a couple updates. I am going to be taking 2 weeks off from the podcast because of a trip I'm going on. I'm going on a trip with my mom and a group of ladies I've never met. Well, that's not completely true. I know another lady on the trip. But we are taking a fun trip to Singapore and Bali for 10 days. And yeah, so I am going to be taking a break from the pod. I'm not sure how I would even attempt to record the podcast over there. Plus, this is one of those trips that's like organized by a travel group and it's like everything is planned out. So I will not have time to try and set up a microphone in my hotel room in Singapore or Bali. So, and you know, we all need a break. It's Thanksgiving next week. So I'm going to take a little vacation from the pod, but we'll be looking forward to getting back and into the swing of things after my trip, I'm sure. Do you ever notice that sometimes when you take a vacation, you need a vacation after the vacation? I know I'm not saying anything groundbreaking. A lot of people feel that way. So yeah, I think like the week I'm back, it's going to be a little bit like, okay, I need at least 4 or 5 days to decompress from all of that travel. But then again, I'm not traveling with my kids. That makes a big difference. If you got the whole family with you and you're, sorry, my husband, but if you're the one that's sort of taking charge of everything about the kids, not everything. He's a fantastic dad. I shouldn't say that. He's not a total deadbeat, but there are just certain things that come easier to me versus him, you know, especially planning and anticipating the needs of the kids. It's just maybe the maternal instinct. I don't know, but we'll see. I guess we'll see when I come back 10 days after I leave how I feel. And if I do feel completely rested, we are planning spa trips in this trip. We are going to be doing some very relaxing and luxurious things. So I'm really excited. It's the first of this type of trip I've ever taken. And I'm glad I'm taking it with my mom. She is a widow. We lost my dad, oh gosh, almost 13 years ago now. And so she's, you know, as he would have wished, she is enjoying her retirement and these years after he passed away. I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. When one spouse has to really kind of take care of the other for many, many years, the spouse who is ill feels a little bit of like they're a burden and certainly wants that person who's taking care of them to be able to enjoy their life again. And I know that with my dad, he even would say that kind of in the throes of being really ill, you know, that I'm such a burden. I don't want you all to have to worry about me anymore. And, that sounds really dark when I say it out loud, but we also understood that too. That was something my dad always said, even before he was ill. You know, you never want to be a burden on someone else. So I'm really happy that my mom is enjoying these years, you know, after he's gone, and she's doing things like this, which is traveling and seeing parts of the world she had never seen before. And I'm so excited to go with her on this because a lot of times on these trips, she's sort of the odd one out, the only widow. You know, there's sometimes couples on the trips or people who are with other loved ones. And you know, so she's sort of tagging along with that. And she'll express that too, saying, oh, you know, I always feel like I'm alone. And so when she asked me about this trip, and this trip has been delayed many times because of COVID. But when she asked me to join her, I was really excited to do that and, you know, be with her and be her partner on this trip because she definitely needs that. And she was so happy when I was like, yeah, you know, I think I can do this and we will go together. It's just going to be really fun. And I'm looking forward to it. So yes, 2 weeks without Hot and Heavy. So if you have episodes to catch up on, the next couple of weeks will be your opportunity to do that. with no new episodes coming out. And look, if you're with some family, things are getting heated, politics are coming up, or whatever issues are coming up at the table that you really don't want to be a part of, just say, you know what, I'm gonna head back into whatever room you're staying in, or just kind of a corner of the house. Pop in your headphones and just escape with some hot and heavy. Talk about Elaine. Only think about Elaine. I think that will cure any family disputes, right? All right. With that, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for this stall is as follows. Elaine dates a hunky guy named Tony for his superficial appeal. George develops a non-sexual crush on him and then causes a rock climbing accident that disfigures him. Kramer thinks he recognizes Jerry's new girlfriend, Jane, from a phone sex line. Jerry is worried that Elaine will recognize Jane as the woman who refused to give Elaine a square of toilet paper in a bathroom stall. This episode was written by Larry Charles. Okay, we start out in a movie theater. We're in the bathroom, and we see a couple of stalls and Elaine's feet in one of the stalls and another pair of feet in the stall next to her. Ugh. Damn, Elaine is so annoyed. She usually checks, but there's no toilet paper in her stall. She politely asks the woman in the next stall for some toilet paper. Well, the first thing the woman says is, "Are you talking to me?" Yeah, if you could just spare some. No, this woman cannot spare it. She doesn't have enough to spare. 3 squares? Nope, she doesn't have a square to spare. Well, what about 1 ply? She'll take 1 ply. This woman is not having it. Look, I don't have a square and I don't have a ply. And she walks out, leaving Elaine behind, toilet paperless. We're out in the theater now, and Jerry's sitting there, and his girlfriend returns to the seat next to him, and she says, "You would not believe what just happened to me in the bathroom." The actress who plays Jane, Jerry's girlfriend, is Jami Gertz. Now, you may recognize her from so many things: Square Pegs, many 80s movies. She was also in Twister. I enjoy her and everything, but I really enjoyed her fantastic performance in the biopic. It was a TV movie about Gilda Radner, and she played Gilda Radner, and she was absolutely fabulous. So I know her from that. And of course, I know her from Twister. Twister is such a classic for me. And I love her character in that movie. She does such a great job. But anyway, in this episode as Jane, I absolutely love her. I love this performance. She is so fun. And first of all, what a fun character to play. I think this is one of, I would argue, maybe the most substantive character of Jerry's girlfriends that we've ever seen. Jerry's girlfriends, a lot of times, they play a role, but more often than not, they just play a character to amp the comedy, but they don't get a lot of comedy themselves. And this Jane character, she's got her own stakes in this episode. So definitely one of those characters. They couldn't really go with an unknown or even someone that was less experienced. Someone like Jami Gertz was needed to pull off this Jane character, and she did, I think, just a great job. She's so charming. She's even a little quirky. She brings a lot to this character, and I'll get more into this as it goes on, but I don't know. I'm just so appreciative of every little thing, all the little even quirks, physicalities, everything she brings to the character, because it really works. And I absolutely think this performance is one of the best Jerry girlfriend performances of the series. And also we're coming off of that girl Tawny from the last episode with the cat with, the whole fungus thing. And it's just, woof, she was terrible. Sorry, actress who played Tawny. But Jami Gertz is top notch, and I'm so excited she was in this episode. Okay, back to the scene. We see Elaine return to her seat next to her boyfriend. He's pretty upset that she forgot his popcorn. What, did you forget about me, babe? Well, whatever. Elaine can't even think about that. She is so distracted by what happened in the bathroom. And then we see this sort of back and forth of the ladies telling their boyfriends about the incident in the bathroom. She was harassing me, and how ridiculous it was that someone couldn't spare 3 squares. Oh, she was insane. I was begging her, please. She was insane. Jerry says, maybe we should get the manager, or too bad they don't have those little ladies with the flashlights, flash her out. But Jane says, I don't even know what she looks like. Then Jerry's wondering where Elaine and her new boyfriend Tony are. He really wanted her to meet them. We go back to Elaine and Tony, and Elaine's wondering where Jerry is, and she's dying to see what his new girlfriend looks like. But Tony's a little distracted. He's looking at a balcony in the theater and asks Elaine if she thinks he could jump off of it and not get hurt. My take on this scene, this is one of the best opening / setup scenes of the series. We get to see foot acting by not only JLD, but Jamie Gertz as well. I noticed this when I was taking notes. This episode is very physical for a lot of the characters, a lot of, physicality having to do with their storylines. And right out of the gate, we see this kind of out of box scenario. We don't see a lot of scenes set up this way. Just all you see of the actresses are their feet, and they can only act with those body parts that are shown. So I just think they do such a great job. The slight movements are so telling, matched up with the dialogue, like the little tapping of the feet. I like how Jane's feet kind of step away when she's like, no, I don't have anything I can spare. We do see Elaine's hand come down when she's talking about one measly ply, but we never see their faces. And through voice and the physicality of their feet, that's all we have. And it's pretty remarkable, I think, that we still get such a fun scene to watch, even though we're seeing such a limited amount of their bodies. And I love how fast this part of the scene with the stalls, how fast it escalates. As soon as Jane says no, she can't spare any toilet paper, you can just feel Elaine get so offended and just irritated, and just how fast that gets hostile is so fun to me. And then when the ladies return to their seats with their respective boyfriends, and we see this kind of ping pong back and forth, that's so brilliantly done. I think it's so fun. The differences in how we see them retelling the story. They're so adamant in their stance. Like, look, a person needs a certain amount to be covered. I simply could not spare it. And then Elaine's just like, can you believe she wouldn't give me any toilet paper? I don't know. I can see it from both sides, where it's like, hey, lady, I don't even have a lot of toilet paper. Why am I going to give some to you? Or like, really, you can't help me out? Like, I have 0 toilet paper and you have some. Anyway, I just think it's so well done. 2 different levels of interests, I guess, with their boyfriend. Jerry is semi-interested and Tony seems totally uninterested, which I love. I've talked before on this podcast about how I'd rather see something than it being told to me. And what I mean by that is, when a character is telling a story about something that happened in the past versus us seeing it, it's not as compelling a lot of times. Now, I will say, with the caveat of having incredible actors, it does work sometimes when they're telling a story because they can do it so well. But this is a scenario where they show and tell. We see what happens in the bathroom stalls, and then it's just as entertaining to see these women tell their boyfriends about it. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting, it's kind of a best of both worlds. We actually see the incident, and then we see them telling it. And the important information that also comes out in this scene, it's a setup scene where we have to establish a lot of the things that will make the storyline work in the episode. So the important information in this scene is that Jane and Elaine don't know what each other looks like, and they've only heard each other. So that's something that's going to be very significant later on. There is one small thing. It's a choice that Jamie Gertz made. I don't know if maybe it was scripted, but I just choose, because she's such a great actress, that Jamie Gertz made this choice. But I love how Jane is clearly wanting some of Jerry's popcorn. It's probably both of their popcorn. It's probably meant to share, but he's just hogging it. And Jamie Gertz makes the very funny choice to just, she's like looking longingly at the bag as Jerry's wolfing it down and talking about getting the manager and all that. She's just like if you just watch that scene, she's really looking at that popcorn like, I want some popcorn now. He's not even clocking that at all. It's very classic Jerry. And lastly, about the scene, I love this little throwaway moment about how Elaine is dying to see what Jane looks like. And it's sort of, a throwaway line, but we don't really know why. Is this specific to Jane, or is she always dying to see what Jerry's girlfriends look like? I just thought it was a very interesting, there's no follow-up about it, but I just thought it was an interesting insight into Elaine and Jerry's relationship and, the way Elaine feels whenever Jerry starts dating someone new. All right, moving on. We are in Jerry's apartment. Kramer enters and asks to use his bedroom phone because his batteries are dead. And Jerry's kind of suspicious right away, and he's like, it's not one of those 976 calls. Oh, come on, 5 minutes, and he'll pay him back. Okay, for those of you who are not around in the 90s or old enough in the 90s to know what this means, the sex hotlines that would advertise really late at night, they were all with the prefix of 976. So it was 976 hot ladies or whatever. They were the phone sex lines. And so in the old days, you would call those numbers and I guess do what Kramer's doing, get matched up with the woman and have a sexy conversation. And there was a really funny tidbit of information in the notes about nothing about this, where there was a class action lawsuit against whoever's in charge of these phone numbers because lots of young boys were racking up thousands of dollars of phone bill charges because they were calling these numbers. So they had to change the law where it had to be 900 numbers, and it had to say there was a disclaimer about you must ask your parents' permission if you were under 18 to use this number or whatever. And so, I mean, who the hell's going to do that? If you're 16, are you going to be like, Mom, can I call this sex number? But it was just an interesting tidbit. But yes, that was in the old days how you got some sexy phone time. Elaine enters and she announces upon arrival she is never going to the movies again. They both ask each other where the other was. They didn't see each other at the theater. Elaine says they were all the way on the side of the theater. Jerry does his impression, with pretty boy, Tony. Hey. He pops his collar, does this little impression. Elaine's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But listen to this. So Elaine tells the story about this woman who didn't give her any toilet paper. And right away, of course, Jerry knows it's Jane. He even tries to defend her a little. It's really hard to judge someone in a situation like that. It's like battle conditions. I like the comparison. It's like asking for someone's canteen in the desert. Elaine's like, no, she does not accept this. And that she better not run into this woman again. Her flinty voice is tattooed on her brain. If she hears it, watch out. And if you guys are like me, I didn't know what the hell flinty meant. I haven't known. I've been watching this episode since 1994. I had no idea what I never bothered to look up what the hell a flinty voice was. But I wanted to do a service to you. So I looked it up. A flinty voice is basically someone speaking with no emotion in a very harsh way. So it is very much how Jane was speaking to Elaine about the toilet paper. Anyway, Elaine's done with that. She's like, so what happened with Jane last night? And Jerry's just like, Elaine's really excited that the four of them are going out on Saturday. That should be fun. Yeah, that should be real fun. You can just see the wheels turning in Jerry's head like, oh shit, I cannot have them meet. Elaine notices how late it's getting and she wants to call Tony. But when she picks up the phone, she hears Kramer's voice talking to a woman. Having a very sexy conversation. She's like, what? Who's Andre? He's calling himself Andre. Jerry listens in with Elaine next to him and says, hey, Andre, get the hell off the phone. Elaine is so confused. Like, what is this? Jerry says, that's Kramer. He's messing around with these 976 numbers. Kramer enters from the bedroom, kind of with a weird look on his face. And Jerry's like, hey, I told you not to do this on my phone. Then Kramer defends himself. He's like, I'm telling you, these phone lines are hilarious. Like this woman, Erica, I was just talking to. And Jerry admits, she actually sounded kind of familiar. Foreshadowing. Kramer wants to go to Monk's, but Jerry says, no, I have to go downtown. And he's giving Elaine a ride home. And then she asks again, well, what happened with Jane last night? Oh, nothing. She just choked on a jujube. My take on this scene, it's another fantastic scene. That moment where Jerry realizes who Elaine is talking about when she's telling her story, that is a top Seinfeld moment for me. I just love the way Jerry's like, oh. And I also love, I can relate to this so hardcore. I love how Elaine is not over this yet. I mean, this whole stall incident is just stewing with her. I mean, she announces it, like I said, announces it upon her arrival into the apartment, I'm never going to the movies again. This establishment of how mad Elaine is here about the toilet paper refusal is important, and as well as knowing that she knows that flinty voice. This all informs Jerry's behavior later, trying to keep them apart, especially knowing that they're supposed to all meet on Saturday. The four of us are going out. Yeah, that should be real fun. And I really have to give Jerry Seinfeld props here. I know I don't really talk about his acting as much as I do the other three, but this is one of his best performances, especially that Tony impression's really fun. It always makes me laugh. And last thing about this scene, how gross is it that Kramer is calling a sex hotline in Jerry's bedroom? Like, what is happening here? Because I mean, I think we all know what people are doing to themselves when they're on these phone lines. They're basically having phone sex. You're not just sitting there with your legs crossed. I'm sorry. Like, things are happening down there. And ew, he's doing this in Jerry's bedroom. And we're just supposed to believe that he thinks it's hilarious. It's like, no, Kramer, you're clearly getting off on this. So I don't know. I just have to call out how disgusting that is, that he's doing that in Jerry's apartment. All right, next we are in Jerry's car. Elaine tells Jerry you need to defrost your freezer. I just think this is such a random way to open the scene, but I like it. You know, they're just having a regular conversation. Elaine checks her watch and Jerry teases her. Oh, don't want to keep Tony waiting. Hey, you got a problem with Tony? Hunky, Tony. Hey, hey, hey. Does anyone else think that Jerry's a little irritated about how good looking Tony is? Just how Elaine is like, I'm dying to see what Jane looks like. You know, if Elaine is dating someone who is better looking than Jerry, he's not going to take that too lightly. I think he's going to be, this is his way of kind of releasing maybe his jealousy a little bit, right? Like, I've got to make fun of this guy. And the fact that, hey, I know I'm smarter than him at least, so I have to make fun of the fact that he is not very smart and a mimbo. But let's get through the scene. I have comments on that later. Elaine tells him, you know, I would be dating him no matter what he looked like. Oh, yeah, sure you would. Oh, Elaine points out the glaring irony here. Like, you're one to talk, Jerry? And he's like, hey, I'm a man. So what? We're expected to be superficial. She says, I'm not being superficial. And then Jerry points out that he's a male bimbo. He's a mimbo. Elaine even chuckles at that, but says no. You know, look, he's just an exciting, charismatic man who just happens to have a perfect face. And that's why you're going out with him. No, it is not, she says. And then Jerry says he thinks George has a non-sexual crush on him. He's like a schoolgirl around Tony. And Elaine agrees. They move on to something they can both agree on. My take on this scene, it's another great scene. 3 in a row. A hat trick, I believe. You know, sports, whatever. I mean, mimbo, what a great word. And I think this is one of the first kind of combo words that made an appearance in pop culture. This wasn't something that's as common as it is now. So I love that we're seeing that happening in this episode. I remember the first time seeing it in 1994 and like laughing so hard, a mimbo. Like, I just thought that was so clever. And I've been using mimbo in my vernacular from then on, pretty much. I've known a few mimbos in my day, and there's like really nothing better to sum up a person like that. Super good looking, but not super smart. A mimbo. There's really no other way to say it. It's so great that Elaine calls out Jerry for being such a hypocrite for dating Tony, because look at him and his track record with dating a lot of women just for their looks. But I have to say, I love the choice. Larry Charles is so brilliant that he doesn't even have Jerry deny this. We're expected to be superficial. He's just so at peace with that. Like, hey, don't even try and call that out on me. I know that I do it. I think that's such a great way to kind of surprise the audience, right? Like I think in a normal sitcom, this would be a back and forth about, I don't know, just like defending that, like, hey, I'm not a superficial person, because most people don't want to be perceived that way. But in this show, they're like, hey, I don't give a shit. I am superficial, but I'm a man. That's how I'm supposed to be. But on the flip side of that, I do understand why Elaine would try to deny the superficiality of her actions. I definitely think that tracks with the character of Elaine. She's sort of fooling herself like, hey, you know, I really am charmed by his personality as well. So I do think that's true. They're both being true to their characters here. Jerry has no issue admitting that he's superficial, while Elaine's like, no, I really am not. You know, I think deep down she knows she is, but she's like I said, she's fooling herself into thinking that there's something deeper with Tony. For me personally, I think I've addressed this a little bit on the podcast. I can't do it. I could not date someone just for their looks. I've known women who've done this and they're completely fulfilled. And hey, if that's your thing, do it. I mean, again, like I said, like there's so many men who do it. Why not do it? But I just know myself. I get so turned off if I do not like someone's personality. It's the perfect combination if they're really good looking and they have a good personality. But like if they're dumb and like say stupid things and are only into jumping off balconies and getting rushes or whatever, like I just it's a turnoff. I guess that's the only way I can put it. I could never do the mimbo thing, but if that's your thing, go for it. No judgment. The end of the scene where they are shaking their head at George's non-sexual crush on Tony. It's just, first of all, I just love that whole vibe of them kind of laughing at George and kind of going, God, he's so pathetic. But it's also such a perfect lead in to the next scene. I mean, the way Jerry says, George is like a schoolgirl around him. And then we literally open the next scene at Monk's with George at a booth with Tony. He's got his head in his hands, just rapt with attention, listening to Tony's story. It's so perfect. Mwah, chef's kiss to that. So yeah, let's just get into the scene. Tony's telling his story to George. And he said, hey, dude, you better step off. George is blown away. He thinks that is so amazing. You said that. Step off. And then George puts his hat on backwards because Tony did and asks him if, would you like to go bowling? Bowling is insane. It's crazy time. Tony's not really into that. You get no rush from bowling. George makes the argument, if you drop a ball on your toe, you'll see visions. That's a rush. No. Tony's thinking about rock climbing. You see that slightest hesitation in George's face, but he agrees. I mean, it's Tony. Just the two of us, though. He just wants to go alone with Tony and that he'll make sandwiches. The more he thinks about it, Tony is definitely down for some rock climbing. Oh, so is George. He is down. Walk me down. And Tony suggests climbing mañana. Ooh, that's not good for George. He's getting a boil lance to mañana. He can't cancel with less than 24 hours notice. This is clearly a lie. George is trying to put this off. He is terrified of going rock climbing. Kramer enters, and Tony is immediately excited to see him. And he says, what are you doing mañana? Well, Kramer says mañana. He's doing nada. Well, how about you scale some rock with me and George? Ooh, George doesn't like that. And Tony, it's going to be too many sandwiches. Kramer's down. All right, Kramer gives him a high five, and Kramer exits. Tony notices George looks a bit worried. You okay, George? You down? Oh, no, I am down. And he high fives George really hard and hurts George's hand. Now, this is not an Elaine scene, but it is one of my favorite scenes of the entire series. Jason Alexander is so perfect in this scene. Everything about it. Dan Cortez, too. They're so fun together. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Elaine cannot believe it. Rock climbing? You need a boost to climb into your bed. All right. Jerry is wondering, what the hell is going on with Tony? What, is he like a sidekick now? Yeah. George likes it. He's such a cool guy. Cool guy? What are you, in 8th grade? And George says, yeah. Look, this is the first time I've ever been friends with a cool guy. He just loves everything about it. Kramer enters, and George jumps down his throat about honing in on his rock climbing trip. It's just supposed to be me and Tony. Kramer's like, well, he asked me. Well, you put him on the spot, which he totally didn't. And Kramer pauses and looks at him. I think you're in love with him. This is one of the, I just love this moment. The audience laughs so hard, as they should. It's so funny. George, you could just see him just going, like, he can't completely deny it, but he does say, what? That's ridiculous. No. You love him. And George does not appreciate this accusation. You better watch yourself on those rocks tomorrow, buddy. And you're not getting any sandwiches. The phone rings and Kramer answers it. Seems a bit confused. We see in the background him saying, who? Jerry asks George, you're making sandwiches? Well, I don't know if there's going to be any places to eat up there. Oh, Elaine, does Tony like peanut butter? She says, hates it. It's a good thing I asked. Jerry asks Kramer who's on the phone. And Kramer says, well, she says Jane, but that voice, it sounds very familiar. It's throaty, almost flinty. Did you say flinty? Yeah, flinty. There's not a ton of Elaine involvement here, but I do love the top of the scene where she's teasing George about going rock climbing. Next, we're rock climbing. George is terrified. He's clutching the rock. Kramer is having the time of his life, swinging back and forth on the harness. Not a problem in the world. He's even yodeling. Touches George. George freaks out, ends up like grabbing onto Kramer's leg, and Kramer's like, what the hell are you doing? Grab the rock. What rock? The rock in front of you. Finally, George gets his bearings and gets back plastered to the rock, not even moving. And Kramer's like, you gotta relax. Try yodeling. Yodel-hee-hoo. And George's pathetic yodel. Yodel-hee-hoo. It's really funny. We hear Tony, who's below them, give them some instructions, take the rope, put it through the carabiner, knot it, whatever. Kramer asks George to do it. And yeah, George says, yeah, he's got it. He's got it. And Tony asks if he has anything to eat, dude. He's got sandwiches in his pocket. He's got tuna and salmon salad because he knows, Tony. He knows you don't like peanut butter. And then we see the rope pull and fall through the holds, and Tony's screaming on the way down. George and Kramer look at each other and start screaming too. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. He and Jane are eating some pizza. And it's so oily that he needs a napkin, and he asks Jane for hers because he's used his up. She says, but I need mine. He's like, what the hell? She looks at her watch. Oh, she's got to get back to work. Jerry, on the way to the bathroom to wash his hands, is like, I really want to hear about this job. And she's like, oh, it's very boring. Someone buzzes. Jane has to answer it. And she says, oh, it's Elaine. She's coming up. Ooh, Jerry is nervous about them meeting. And he thinks quickly and he says, you know what? You do need some gum. He gives her many, many little pieces of gum. It's filling her mouth. She's like, isn't this too much? And he's like, no, you need it. Yeah, your breath stinks. It's horrible. Elaine enters and gets introduced. Jane can barely talk because of all the gum in her mouth. Elaine is definitely weirded out, but is nice to her. Then Jane says, all right, I'll see you Saturday night, and exits. As soon as she's gone, Elaine asks Jerry, what is with the gum? He's like, yeah, I know. It's a big problem. He says, this gum issue is probably going to prevent them from going out on Saturday night. She's just one of these people, always has to be different. We see George and Kramer on the other side of Jerry's door. They're nervous to tell Elaine. They can hear her in there. They have to tell her about Tony's accident. And then they're blaming each other about who was supposed to tie the knot. Whoa, Ginga. You were supposed to tie the knot. Jerry and Elaine can hear them, so they open the door. Elaine's like, hey, you're alive. Did you guys have fun? Yeah, for a little while. Elaine asks about Tony. And they tell her that Tony took a bit of a tumble. And the first thing she asks about is his face. Did something happen to his face? Well, it all depends on what you mean by happen. Elaine pushes her way past them. And of course, Jerry has to dig in here. Well, aside from that, how do you like the sandwiches? My take on this scene, I really enjoy the top of the scene with Jane refusing to let Jerry use her napkin. We're sort of, we're doing this thing. We're chipping away at her weird affinity for paper products. But I do have to point out, I guess it's the mom in me. Jerry doesn't ask very politely. I mean, where's the please, Jerry? Come on. The gum gag is really funny, really good, really fun way to keep Jane and Elaine from recognizing each other. I think it's really funny. That little chat with Jerry and Elaine about the gum is very cute. What is with the gum? I think Elaine's best moment in this scene is when she asks about Tony's face. I love that. I love his face. What happened to his face? There's a lot of reacting from Elaine here. Not a ton of comedy, except at the end a little bit, but it's just a really fun scene again. All right, next we're at Elaine's apartment. I'm going to call this the Elaine interrogation of Tony. She's trying to get information. So what did the doctor say? Elaine sits on the couch and we see Tony's face. It's completely bandaged up. He looks like a mummy. Elaine is trying to get information, how badly his face is damaged. She needs to know, is there long, jagged scars, gross deformities, maybe major skin grafts? What does he remember? And Tony says, he's pretty out of it. He was on a lot of drugs. It's pretty cool. She's like, yes. But in the state, do you recall any words about radical reconstructive surgery being uttered? He's drawing a blank, babe. Think, Tony, think. There's a knock at the door. It's George wanting to talk to Tony. And Tony tells him to step off. He doesn't want to see him. And George pleads his case. Look, it wasn't my fault. And, he was getting him a sandwich. I made such great sandwiches, Elaine. Tony tells him to beat it, dude. George has something else, though. He brought Superman comics. Tony is excited about that. He motions to Elaine, bring him over. And he says, look, next time it'll just be the two of us, Tony. There isn't going to be any next time, George. Oh, Oh, Tony, don't. Elaine's had enough. Could you just step off, George? She tells him to leave, closes the door, and then realizes something. George, wait! Could you take this garbage out? My take on this scene, not to be overdramatic, but Julia Louis-Dreyfus's performance in this scene was sort of a transformative moment for me as a young teen dreaming of being an actor. I had this episode on tape. I studied this scene and I just gleaned so much, probably more than anyone would have ever intended with this scene. But I just learned so much from JLD's performance here. And what I'm talking about is her physicality, the way she assigns a physicality to everything she's saying in this scene to Tony on the couch. It's so brilliant to me. And it showed me as like this young actor, aspiring actor, dreams of becoming an actor, this young teen sitting on my couch watching this. When she says long, jagged scars, she makes a jagged scar with her hand. Gross deformities, she makes a face, she like kind of a gross face. Major skin grafts, she kind of raises her eyebrows. Like everything has an assigned physicality to it. And I don't know, I was just watching this and absorbing this and saying, wow, that like brings so much more rather than her just sitting with her hands in her lap. It just, to me, it was, like I said, transformative. I know that's overdramatic, but hey, I'm an actor. That's what I'm supposed to do. Even when she says woozy state, this sort of woozy state, she kind of, puts herself in a woozy kind of head motion. It's so brilliant and such a fun way to punch up the comedic performance here. It's sort of to act out what you're saying as you're saying it. But I have to say this has to be done in a subtle way. Otherwise, it can come off really slapsticky. She does it. She has that perfect level where it's believable someone would talk like that. JLD nails it, that perfect level of doing this physicality assigned to the dialogue, but doing it at a level that's just perfect. It's not too crazy. It's totally believable that someone would do this. It really just taught me the importance of physicality way earlier than I learned it in improv and other acting classes I've taken. This scene, like I said, this moment in this scene where she's on the couch with Tony, much like the flinty voice for Elaine, it's tattooed on my brain. Now, when George arrives in the scene, I mean, Jason Alexander, again, the brilliance of his performance. I cannot get enough of the moment where he says, oh, Tony, don't. It is so ridiculous. It's so funny. And just a classic Elaine and George relationship moment for her to kick him out, kick him when he's down too. Like, just step off, George. Like, he's so incredibly heartbroken and sad. And then she has the nerve to call him back, to give him her garbage to take out. Such a perfect illustration of their relationship. She could give a shit about how much he's heartbroken by this breakup with Tony. She's like, whatever, just step off, George, and take out my garbage. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jane is massaging Jerry's shoulders. And he says, I've been waiting on this for a long time. And that's, of course, a reference to the masseuse episode. Jerry mentions, it's such a shame that Tony got all banged up. They can't go out on Saturday night. And she says, well, maybe when he's feeling better. Oh, yeah, Jerry's down. Kramer enters and Jerry introduces him to Jane. Hello, Kramer. Kramer's reaction to that is to have a violent shiver down his body. She says, Jerry's told me so much about you. I feel like I know you intimately. Oh, no, Kramer says. He's all awkward. He says, no, I've never talked to you on the phone. Anyway, I have to go. I'm going to uptown to the Y. Jane says she's going uptown, too. You want to split a cab? Well, what about the driver? So this goes back to the little we hear of their phone sex conversation earlier when Elaine picks up the phone. But Jane's like, what? Oh, no, I changed my mind. I'm not going to go now. So Jane leaves. Kramer freaks out after she's gone. He is sure it's Erica, the phone sex woman. Jerry doesn't believe it. Next, we're at Monk's. Elaine is telling Jerry she's worried about Tony's bandages coming off. What if? She makes a face. Oh, you're worried he might look like Zippy the Pinhead. Elaine's wondering, well, what is her obligation here? She was just dating him casually, and it was probably going to end soon anyway. Jerry calls her out. Oh, I thought you didn't care about his looks. She lied. She knows he's a mimbo. Then she gets a little bit introspective. He's my mimbo. Elaine gets emotional and thinks this may turn out to be the way for her to learn what true love really is. And she's all choked up. But Jerry isn't listening. He was distracted by seeing Kramer in the corner of the coffee shop. He calls him over. Kramer says, oh, yeah, he asked Erica, the phone sex woman, to meet him at the coffee shop. Well, in walks Jane, and Jerry is appalled, accuses her of selling sexual favors over the phone. How could you do that? She's very offended. She says, I sell paper goods, you jerk. Paper goods? Elaine is still recovering from her little emotional moment, and she asks Jane for a tissue. And Jane says, no, I'm sorry, I can't spare it. Well, that triggers something for Elaine. Jane asks where the ladies' room is. Kramer points it out to her, and she starts walking in that direction. And Elaine says, I have to go to the bathroom too, and runs to the bathroom to beat Jane. In the bathroom, we see Jane and Elaine in the same kind of setup as the first scene of the episode, both of them in a stall next to each other. We see their feet. Jane says, oh, damn, something wrong? Yeah, there's no toilet paper in here. Do you have some? And Elaine gives it back to Jane. I'm sorry, I don't have it. I can't spare a square. Wait a second. I know you. That's right, honey, and I know you. We see Elaine with all the rolls of toilet paper run out, and Jane yells, no! Elaine dumps all the toilet paper onto Jerry's lap. Here, take it. Jane comes out. She approaches Jerry and says, don't call me anymore. And then stops at Kramer's ear and says, you either. My take on this scene, lots of emotions here for Elaine. I love that we get to see this range from JLD. You know, she's worried in the beginning, and then we see her admitting that she lied about not caring about Tony's face and his looks. It's such a great moment. We see shallow Elaine emerging, and I absolutely love it. Her little emotional mini monologue is funny, but it's more to illustrate how Jerry isn't paying attention at all. And, you know, the whole thing, too, is that she sheds some tears, and that's why she has to ask Jane for a tissue. It's all done really well. You know, it's all like kind of connecting. So I guess we're meant to believe that because Jane sells paper goods, she's also very protective of all paper goods. It's a bit of a stretch. I think like the whole, I sell paper goods, so it's like, that's why I never want to give toilet paper or tissues out. What? The end when Elaine realizes who Jane is, and then that run to the bathroom. Oh my God. It is one of my favorite moments of the series, especially the way when Elaine turns to get into the bathroom and she's like sidestepping and keeps looking at Jane and then goes through the door. Again, just fantastic physical comedy. JLD is a genius with that. We get more foot acting. It's like kind of a good bookend here. We start with foot acting. We sort of end with foot acting. Those little taps when Elaine says something wrong, just perfect. And I love her escape with that armload of toilet paper and the way she waltzes through Monks with it, dumps it onto Jerry's lap. And I never sort of thought about this, but I think she dumps it on Jerry's lap as sort of like a, fuck you for not telling me that was your girlfriend who didn't give me the toilet paper. Here, take it. And a really fun reveal at the end when Jane is Erica. So I think she does both. I want to say she does both. She does the paper goods job, but she also does the phone sex job. You know, she's doing both. It's fine. Back to what I was saying earlier, you know, this character of Jane, this is easily the most substantive of all of Jerry's girlfriends. And that's even more illustrated with giving her the final blow line of this episode. I mean, to give that to a guest actor, wow. I mean, that says a lot about the weight that they gave to this Jane character. Man, Jamie Gertz just hit the jackpot with this appearance. Not only was it such a fantastic, like, juicy role to play Jane, but she just knocked it out of the park. I just don't think there could have been anyone who was more perfectly cast than Jamie Gertz. Very, very good job. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side.
Every day, thousands of American men face hardships, such as being afraid of everything, the inability to charm waitresses, zero desire to get a rush from physical activity. And this isn't happening thousands and thousands of miles away. This suffering could be happening right next door to you. For as little as $5 a month, you can sponsor one of these pathetic men and provide them with the help they need and sort of deserve. Cool Guy Outreach is a non-profit organization designed to match an insecure man with a cool guy. The cool guy will hang out with him, help him get out of his comfort zone, teach him how to find his own inner cool guy. Founded in 1994 by cool guy Tony Mimbo, Cool Guy Outreach has matched over 100,000 cool guys with sad men, changing their lives forever.
I was so lost. I couldn't hold down a job. I was 37 years old and living with my parents. And then I got a letter saying I had been sponsored by a nice lady in Topeka and that I had been matched up with a cool guy. Oh, Rick. Rick changed my life. He spent time with me. Real quality time. He hugged me and told me he was proud of me. He took me mountain biking. And even though I'm now paralyzed from the waist down because I crashed on that trail, I'll never forget how he changed my life. I may never be able to walk again, but I do get free pie at restaurants. Thanks, Cool Guy Outreach.
For just $5 a month, you can help a tragic, sad man find his cool guy and find a life worth living. Call 555 You Love Him. That's 555 You Love Him. And sponsor a man today. Once we receive your payment, you will receive a picture of your man and the cool guy he's been matched with. You will also receive monthly updates with his progress. Please find it in your heart to help inadequate men and become a Cool Guy Outreach sponsor today. Cool Guy Outreach, ending mediocre men one loser at a time.
And we're back. The extras for this episode, there was an inside look. JLD says that this episode haunts her because whenever she uses a public bathroom, many times someone will ask her if she can spare a square. And she says, it's kind of irritating. I don't blame her. She's like, I'm trying to go to the bathroom. Can we not do a bit? There was a deleted scene in this episode, so I believe it was supposed to be a tag at the very end. It was a scene with Elaine and Tony rock climbing together, and it's after he's healed up, and she says that, wow, your face looks perfect other than one little line. You know, you can't even tell anything happened. And then Tony notices a pimple on Elaine's cheek, and he can't deal with it. Complexion is his thing. He tells her to step off and ends the relationship, abandons her on the rock. And Elaine's like, but I can't get down on my own. And then she starts yodeling to comfort herself in the same way that George was yodeling, kind of a yodeling. This should have been deleted. It's not very well written. It's a little bit of a stretch. It's not great. All right, moving on to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts this week, and this is what Greg had to say. This has always been one of my favorite episodes of the series. There's so much going on with all four, and every part of it is funny. From the way both Elaine and George feel about the Mimbo, to Jerry's girlfriend being someone he has to keep Elaine from, and Kramer's phone sex calls to the same woman, it all weaves together in such a way that this episode feels longer than it really is. True, yes, just little technical thing behind the scenes here for the podcast, I kind of divide out my notes per scene, and this episode has so much packed into it, but there are longer scenes. Is this interesting to anyone? Probably not, but I just thought that was interesting. The last couple of episodes, it's been like 17, 18, 19 scenes. So it's like quicker scenes, but with a lot packed in. This, they sort of stretched out the scenes, but there is so much going on. And yes, Greg, I love how everything weaves together so beautifully. Larry Charles really wrote a masterpiece with this episode. Next, Greg says, the opening scene in the restroom is iconic. And while I'm inclined to agree with Elaine on this, perhaps there really wasn't enough to spare. However, even if this were true, Jane needed to hand over whatever was left as she herself left the stall. Help a sister out. Side note, I love how Jamie Gertz plays this role. I've always been a fan of her every time I've seen her in something. Oh my gosh, Greg, we are so on the same page. Yes, it was a gift that Jamie Gertz got this role. I just don't see it being played much better by anyone else. I agree. I know. I think we're all inclined as fans of JLD and Elaine. We want to agree with Elaine here. But in the beginning, I do see like how Jane is like, look, a person has a certain amount to be covered. I simply could not spare it. But I think as we see her weirdness with paper products, she definitely had enough. She just didn't want to share. Greg goes on to say, I love seeing Elaine dating someone who is actually good looking and not some loser schlub they usually pair her with. The fact that all he seems to care about are extreme sports and they probably have zero in common, I do love that she's into him based on his looks alone. Dan Cortez was everywhere in the 90s, and it has me wondering if maybe he did fall off a cliff because I haven't seen that dude in anything in ages. Elaine trying to sell Jerry on the fact that she would be dating Tony despite his perfect face is hilarious because we see that she ultimately gets tested on this. Totally. Like I said before, I like that she tries to hold on to, because I do think she's even trying to believe it herself. Like, no. It's just a coincidence that he's so good looking. I'm also attracted to so many other things about him. I like the whole she's trying to fool herself part of it in the beginning. And then, like you say, Greg, that she gets tested on it and then she has no choice but to be like, no, of course I only like him for his looks. Dan Cortez, for sure. He definitely did fall off a cliff, metaphorically, with his career. I was actually looking at his IMDb profile. I look at everyone's, not just the ladies, because of the possibility of a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. I always have to check that. You guys know this. But anyway, yeah, he really doesn't have a ton recently for credits, but yeah, he was everywhere in the 90s for sure. And I really do think he did a great job in this episode as well. Greg's next comment. George's story is hilarious here as well, and a little relatable to me. One of my best friends is a male supermodel, Clint Morrow. And I know exactly what George is saying when he says, you should see how he talks to waitresses. They give him free pie. It is fascinating to see this sort of thing happen to someone in real life. I've never gotten free pie. And I love how Elaine laughs her ass off at George when she finds out he's going rock climbing with Tony. You need a boost to climb into your bed is such a funny line. Yes, exactly. That is so funny, Greg. I did friend Clint, probably just because I wanted to look at his pictures. He is insanely gorgeous. And I know that you guys are friends. So I would imagine, yes, you would see some very fascinating interactions when you're hanging out with someone like that, a male supermodel. Yeah, that's going to be, he's way better looking than Tony is. So I can just imagine what kind of scenarios you would find yourself in with him. I too have always loved, you need a boost to climb into your bed. And even just the way George is like, oh, right. It's so great. Next, Greg says, another favorite Elaine line is when she meets Jane, who is now chewing gum thanks to Jerry, and then says, what is with the gum? Totally. Classic JLD delivery. I love it too. And lastly, Greg says, the ending where George is basically begging Tony for his forgiveness and Elaine saying, step off, George, over and over. It cracks me up because she's leading into the cool by attachment thing that George did with Tony as well. Also, did Tony only land on his face? His arms and body are fine. They should have bandaged him up more since we can still see most of his face and it looks fine. Elaine's speech at the end where she admits she only dated Tony because of his looks, and then how she tears up thinking maybe she will know true love even if he's deformed. She plays this all so well. I love when JLD has to cry in one of these scenes because it's never seriously sad and it's more funny than anything. She does this better than any actress I know. And then her subsequent triumph over Jane by stealing all the toilet paper is just excellent. Oh, yeah. I love the vindication at the end with Elaine and the toilet paper. How satisfying is that? Oh, and I agree. JLD's cry acting is unmatched. I love this. She does it again, that perfect level that I was talking about before. She knows how to take it to the comedic level, but doesn't push it too far. Yeah, the crying, it's like she just like curls her lip and her voice goes like this. It is perfect. And I will fully admit, I have copied this in improv sets and sketch comedy. I fully am doing the JLD cry acting because it is so fucking perfect. I remember it more, like it's definitely in this scene, but I always think about when she works for Mr. Pitt and she does the whole, I can't go. Oh, it's one of my favorites. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in thoughts this week. And if you would like to become a contributor to Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. And you could have your thoughts on a future episode. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. The scene in Elaine's apartment with Tony. I mean, I went on and on about it. And I said it was a pivotal part of my acting training when I was young. Acting out all those descriptions, the jagged scars, the woozy state, all of it. Now, a close second is her run to the monk's bathroom to get ahead of Jane. Always makes me laugh. And my final notes. This is one of the top episodes of the series. So many iconic moments. Elaine gets 2 really fun plots, juicy plots. She gets Tony and toilet paper. It's great. And there's a lot packed into this episode, like I was saying before. And when all of the main 4, I'm going to totally echo Greg here. And believe me, I wrote this before I read Greg's comment. So this is just a coincidence that we pretty much have the same comment here. But like when all 4 have a connection with their storylines, it just works so well. And that's what happens here. I love how Tony is central to Elaine, George, and Kramer's storylines, but there's also a connection to Jane via Elaine, and Kramer's connected to Jane as well. And, you know, everyone's connected to each other. Jerry's connected to Jane and Elaine. Like it's so well done. Great job, Larry Charles. I swear, Larry Charles seems to give Elaine the most juiciest comedic plots, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Larry Charles, for that. I mentioned it a little bit before, but Dan Cortez, I had to give a shout out to Dan Cortez. He is Tony. Really, really well done. And he really holds his own with JLD, Jason Alexander, Kramer. He does such a great job. He didn't interact with Jerry, of course, but I just wanted to give Dan Cortez a shout out. He does a really good job. Overall, this is a near perfect episode. There's no need for any scene swaps. I think it all worked. Great balance with the main 4. Really, really strong guest actors who played really important characters. I mean, really, if anything was off with the casting, this episode wouldn't be the classic that it is today. Bravo. Everything just clicked. Everything was perfect. Writing, performances, guest actors. Bravo. And I think that's all I can say about The Stall. Thank you so much for listening. I will be gone for a couple of weeks, but please catch up on old episodes that you haven't listened to yet. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday, and I will see you next time.